I have put off talking about this episode of the Percy Jackson show for a whole gosh dang week. Because I don't even know where to start with this one. There's some problems in this episode, and I'm going to talk about them. And I haven't been watching other people's content on the show, but I'm fairly certain a couple of the other YouTubers I follow might have the same issues with this one, but I'm not 100% sure. Point is, I understand people recognize that there are problems with this episode, but man, it was so good that I don't care. They took what was easily, I think, the weakest segment of the book and did something really amazing with it. This is the segment of the book, for those who know anything about the book, where the trio encounter Ares, the god of war. And he takes them to a diner and gives them a little mini side quest in exchange for help getting to the next stage of their main quest. Typical RPG stuff. What's his real name? I really should know his real name. The Edge, the wrestler. I keep looking it up. I'm like, what's his real name? I keep looking it up and I cannot remember it because I'm not huge into wrestling, but I watched for several years. Oh God, it's probably been a decade ago now. Crap, man, I'm old. And he was around a lot during the time period when I watched, and so I know him as that. But he's Ares, and he's just perfect, like just perfect. Like, I struggle to think of better casting than this in anything. It's so good. Because, as someone with experience wrestling, he's very good at moving from kind of seething emotions to really over-the-top ones, and that's really necessary for this character. He's just very good here. Anyway... As the kids are leaving St. Louis, because the police are after them now, they think that not only did they have something to do with the destruction of the train on the way into the city, but also the damage to the arch from Percy's battle with the Chimera. And on top of that, we find out in a little while, Percy's stepdad, Smelly Gabe, has blamed Percy for the destruction of their car and the disappearance of Percy's mom. And this is all stuff that technically happened in the book, too. So now the police are after them. They can't really stay in one place for long, which is good. It really kicks the pace of the quest into high gear and it compels these kids forward, which is extremely good at this point in the story. And I like how they handled this here in the book. It was damage to the bus from way back when they encountered the Furies on that bus, back in the Medusa episode, that was the damage, the initial damage that the kids were being blamed for. Here they put it on, they move it to the train, which is immediately before this. It ties the two events together in the minds of the police, and you don't have to necessarily remember something that happened several episodes back. Also, the damage to that bus was not as severe in the show as I think it was in the book, so it ends up rounding out, I think, to being at least as good, if not better, here. If that's not even what I'm talking about. That stuff's fine. That's part of the framing device of this book. It takes a little while to get to it, but it's part of the framing device of this book that even the police end up after Percy, that people start to turn against him. It's almost as if the world of gods and the world of mortals have both turned against him and see him as the villain. And in the end, he's able to prove both of them wrong, just by standing up for what's right. And it's very good. So they're heading out of the city, but they can't take a train because they can't get a ticket because the police are looking for them. So we get this really funny scene where they're just walking down the highway, and they hide when somebody comes by on a motorcycle. But then he stops, and it turns out that he's Ares, and he wants to help them, which is kind of sus because Ares is a dick, but help is help, right? And he claims that he can get them a ride to, and this is also a change in the book, the Lotus Casino specifically. that's the specific location that they're headed to, because it's a place where Hermes hangs out, and as the god of travelers, he can get them the rest of the way. That is a little different, but I like it, because there is stuff to do with Hermes, who is Luke's father, remember, that is very important to the rest of this story, because Luke is a very important figure in this story. No spoilers, but he's very important. And his relationship with his dad drives his motivation. And it is so cool that they're going to introduce us to Hermes a little early in this version, so we can start to get that background for Luke now. And so it's already clear that that's what they're doing. And it's already clear what part of the book they're going to replace with Hermes' help. So you kind of go into the next episode knowing to expect those overall inconsequential changes that round out to a more satisfying story overall. This brings us to Ares' quest, though. In the book, the kids go to an amusement park, and I can't remember if the book version of the amusement park was actually built by Hephaestus, or if it was just modified for his purposes. But in the show version, it was specifically built by Hephaestus. And in some way to test demigods, because there's a specific demigod counter on the entrance. And Ares sends the kids there to get his shield, which was left behind at some point. And in the book version, all three of them go. And they end up having this really generic sequence where it's implied that there's going to be some romantic tension at some point between Percy and Annabeth, because they have to retrieve the shield from the thrill ride of love. It's a basic tunnel of love ride, but with like some dips and stuff. And it's a relatively cute scene for like 2 seconds, but then they get in there and there's something pulled from the mythology again that they have to deal with, and it takes at least surface level each of their 3 skills, with Percy moving water with his water powers, Annabeth using her powerful mind to calculate a jump, and then Grover swooping in using the flying shoes that we've only seen him use once in the show so far, that he was given specifically because Percy needs to avoid flying, because Zeus is his father's rival. And that's all well and good, but it just ends up being boring and forgettable. And the whole setup is that Ares was there sneaking around with Aphrodite, who is Hephaestus' wife, but they're having a very persistent, very shameless affair. And that Hephaestus was trying to capture them and put them on basically Olympian reality TV to embarrass them. And that's stupid. I'm sorry, it just is. Because they're having a very persistent and shameless affair. Emphasis on shameless. They don't care that everybody knows. And the show changes it. Rather than them going to this out-of-the-way amusement park on Earth to hide their affair, they basically go there to flaunt it in front of Aphrodite's husband, because Ares is, again, an asshole. And so instead of the more generic trap that I guess they did utilize it to give us Annabeth's fear of spiders early, but that's something we can deal with later. That's fine if we lose that. But instead of that, they give us the golden chair that Hephaestus used to, this is going to sound wrong, to force the gods to let him marry Aphrodite. You have to understand, Hephaestus is like the one god that would understand what most of the non-godly characters in these stories go through, because he was rejected by the others to the point that he's now handicapped by it. And you could definitely interpret that story as him trying to earn the respect and the acceptance of the other gods by marrying the most beautiful. And it puts Percy and Annabeth in a position to have to choose one another in a very overt kind of way. Because in the show's version, they're the only two who go, and they find the golden chair, And it's set up so that one of them has to sit in it to get the shield. And so they have the opportunity to argue with each other over which one of them gets to sacrifice for the other one. And it's a painful scene to watch because you don't want to see either one of them sacrifice for the other, because they may never get out of this. Whoever sits down in that chair might be effectively dead. And we get a scene from the book moved to this episode where Annabeth sees the fates cutting a thread, implying that someone is going to die, and this could be that. But in the end, Percy wins the right to sacrifice himself by making the very logical point that Annabeth is just better at all of this than he is. And they have this tearful moment where they bond, they connect, and it's so good. It's different than how they eventually end up really connecting in the book. That moment came kind of during a conversation. I've been rereading the book. There's more of it than I remembered, but the point that I remember comes in a conversation that we don't get in the show's version. We don't end up getting it here. I guess we kind of. It's a little. It's complicated. It's weird. But this is so much more visceral and so much more visual and dynamic. And then once Percy is gilded in gold, stuck in this chair like a statue, and the shield is free, and Annabeth is refusing to leave, trying to dismantle this machine that no one but Hephaestus, including the other gods, has ever been able to understand. That's when Hephaestus shows up, and they have a conversation. And not only is this scene just great because of that conversation, but I love the casting here. Hephaestus is played here by Timothy Munson from stuff like Psych and Gallivant, and of course the Woody Woodpecker movie is his greatest work. And not only is he just a really cool guy with a really cool presence who's able to convey a lot of emotions through just like his eyes alone, just a fantastic actor. But for those who aren't aware, it's been a couple years ago now, I think. He had a stroke and had to undergo brain surgery, and his recovery process was very long. And so the cane that we see Hephaestus walking with in this episode is his real cane. So they got this not only fantastic actor with a fantastic presence, but someone who is disabled in a similar way to Hephaestus to play the character. And I couldn't be more thrilled. It's just such a fantastic choice. And he has this conversation with Annabeth where he insists that this is just the way things are. Sacrifices are made and the gods don't actually get punished for it, and people backstab each other, and everything sucks. And Annabeth insists that they don't have to be, because here comes Percy and he's not like that, and things could be different. And apparently that's exactly what Hephaestus wanted to hear, because of course he doesn't like that either. He plays that game because he has to survive, but, and this is consistent with Hephaestus in the books too, like he expects a certain amount of respect because he is still a god, but he's typically pretty amicable and nice and even respectful of demigods too, because he understands. He's in a position to understand better, and so he turns the machine off and lets Percy go. And this is the scene that I do have a couple problems with, because even though I want to stress, from a dialogue standpoint and from a character interaction standpoint and from like the dynamics of the characters and what this means for them standpoint, this scene is amazing. It's beautiful. It's fantastic. I love it. I love everything about it. But the chair itself doesn't make a lot of sense in this context, and that is the one thing that annoys me. What did Hephaestus expect here from Ares and Aphrodite? Did he expect that one of them would sit in the chair and sacrifice for the other to get the shield back? Obviously not, since they just left, and then Ares went and found a demigod to do it anyway. The obvious thing. So what did Hephaestus think was going to happen? that he was going to trap a demigod here, right? And if he really does care about demigods and really doesn't like that backstabby nature of things, why would he set this up to do that? Why would he set this up to trap forever, I would assume, one of Ares' kids or something? Unless the plan had more steps to it originally, before all this lightning thief stuff happened and everybody got distracted away from this stuff. And his real intention was to, like, have Ares send one of his kids to their death or something, and then, like come in with a camera or something and say, hey, look, this is the kind of person Ares is, he sucks ass, and then let the kid go. Maybe that was his intention, and he was instead able to repurpose it to kind of test Percy and Annabeth's resolve and learn a little bit about what kind of people they are. But it's still, it's a little wonky. Because somebody was going to get hurt here, and it wasn't going to be Ares or Aphrodite. It just wasn't. And Hephaestus should have known that. But there are ways to kind of explain that away, to overlook it, and I think the scene is otherwise fantastic enough that it's worth overlooking. In the meantime, though, you may have noticed I didn't mention Grover during the show version of events, and that's because he doesn't come with them. I mentioned that earlier. It was just Percy and Annabeth that go. Ares keeps Grover behind as a hostage, basically, which may seem a little over the top, but he's the god of war, so it makes sense that he would think something like that was necessary. And this gives Grover a chance to do something that utilizes his actual skills rather than using the flying shoes badly, except for like 2 seconds when he needs to use them well. He gets to actually be like the emotionally mature, emotionally intelligent member of the group, which is the thing that I think is criminally underutilized in the book series. Because not only is he, like, he develops at half the rate of a human, and that may be mentally too, it's never 100% clear. So he may be mentally a 12-year-old, but he's 24 years old. He's been around for 24 years. He's seen more stuff, and he's been more deeply immersed in the world of the mythological stuff than the kids have been. So he would have more experience anyway, but he's also an empath. Like, satyrs in this universe are empaths, which I'm sure is drawn from mythology. I don't know specifically where, but he's an empath. He can to some level or another read emotions. And so he is the emotionally intelligent member of the group. And staying behind with Ares, he's able to use that to emotionally manipulate Ares into letting stuff slip. And by the time their conversation's over, not only has Edge gotten a chance to act, which is fantastic, because again, I love him in this role, but Grover's managed to get enough out of Ares that he's pretty sure that Ares has something to do with the bolt being missing. That he knows at the very least who stole it, which ends up bringing him to the wrong conclusion that it was one of Ares' kids that did it, because I guess Ares and Hades are teaming up in Grover's version of events to start a war for Ares and to maybe get Hades out of the underworld for Hades through that war, right? And so they end up assuming that it was Clarice that stole the bolt, which is wrong, but he is right that Ares knows more about the bolt and its whereabouts and who took it than he's letting on. That when Zeus sent everybody out to look for the bolt, Ares actually found it. And he may have actually come to the right conclusion with just a few additional facts that the kids will come to over the course of the rest of the story. So it's like, in the end, it's not like a huge win for him, but he still manages to outfox a god. And it was extremely cool and way cooler than anything that Grover got to do at this section of the book. And like, they don't make a big deal of it, but you have to wonder, how freaked out was Ares when Percy and Annabeth both showed back up at that diner to give him his shield? That neither one of them needed to sit down in that machine, at least as far as he could tell, in order to get it back. That they were able to best him in that way as well. Like, by the end of this, he has to be fuming and just not letting it show. Because these kids have shown him up so completely Yet he still sends them on their way, which should be an indication that he is more involved in this plan than they think he is, and that there's more to this than what they realize. Because I don't think I've talked about it in the reviews. Percy's been having dreams, too, about somebody tempting him, luring him. And we're going to get more of that in the next episode, too, and he's finally going to bring it up to the rest of the group. But there is so much more to this than they have realized so far. Like, I have to imagine that Chiron must suspect, and he's just hoping that he's wrong. But yeah, this is all set up for the big payoff at the end of this 5-book series. And they're doing a very good job of setting it up here. The simple fact that Ares doesn't just vaporize all of them for basically embarrassing him, and instead still sends them on their way, is in and of itself set up for the fact that there's more going on here. This episode, again, it has a couple of issues, but the wonderful things about it make up for those issues just completely. I don't know what else to say. This is an amazing episode, and I loved it a lot. That said, what did you guys think of this episode of the Percy Jackson TV show? If you have seen it, let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, you might as well like the video, share it with anyone else who you think would enjoy my content, subscribe if you haven't. You can also check out links to my various social medias, as well as to where you can purchase the first 3 novels in my book series, which are available for sale now. That'll be in the video description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.